testing, see if we can get any answers when it comes to testing as well. And people are, again, very concerned about the level of testing done in the UK. The British In Vitro Diagnostics Association, which represents lots of companies making up the UK's testing sector, said it didn't receive a meaningful approach from the government until April the 1st. Of course, that's the day before Matt Hancock announced the 100,000 a day target. Is that true, or is that something that's off beam?
Well, again, when it comes to our approach towards testing, it is the case that the Department of Health and Social Care have been in touch with a range of organisations, both public and private sector, in order to ensure that we can increase the number of tests in this country. We now have capacity to test 38,000 people a day, and we're on course to be able to test 100,000 people a day by the end of this month. But again, each individual organisation that has approached the government with offers of help has been responded to and dealt with in a particular fashion. And it would again be wrong for me to go through each individual offer at this stage, because there are factors governing each of those approaches which are specific to each company, to each offer and to each test.
Just interesting to hear you say that we're on course to meet that 100,000 target by the end of the month. Is that really true? Because it does feel as if that's a very long way to go still.
Yes, we are on course to meet that 100,000 target. As I say, we have the capacity to do 38,000 tests. That's a significant increase on where we were when we last talked.
100,000 capacity or 100,000 tests?
Well, we want to make sure that every test that people are capable of taking is being taken. But you are right to draw attention to the fact that we have the capacity to provide tests to people, but not all of those tests have been taken up. And that's why the Health Secretary has ensured that test capacity is now being extended beyond frontline NHS and social care workers to others in the public sector and other key workers as well, because we want to make sure that having generated this additional capacity, and I must thank those who've been involved in Public Health England, the NHS and others in the amazing efforts that they've made in order to increase this number, we must make sure, of course, that the additional test capacity is used in the most efficient way possible.
Just to be crystal clear then, is that target now to have a capacity of 100,000 tests by the end of the month, or to actually be carrying out 100,000 tests?
100,000 tests delivered, being carried out by the end of the month.
Now, we've been talking about being behind other countries and being perhaps slow to act in some ways. One area where some people are surprised that we haven't done more on is the wearing of face masks. We've seen other countries recommend people wearing face masks when out in public situations. Do you think the UK government advice could change on that?
Well, the advice will come from our scientific advisors. The clear evidence is that in certain clinical settings, as you know, face masks are absolutely vital. But we also need to reflect on whether or not it would be appropriate, and our medical and scientific advisors have said this, to extend the use of other types of face mask in other settings. But it would be wrong for me to jump the gun and to anticipate what the scientific advice would be. The best way to proceed on these questions is to have our scientists and our doctors look at the evidence, advise government, and then government make a decision on the basis of that independent advice.
Flights entering the country as well, because again, other countries have been swifter than us to lock down on international flights, to impose quarantines. Have we been too slow, and is that something that we're looking at too?
I don't think so, no. And I can understand this is a live area of public debate. But one of the things that we do need to make sure is that we get flights into this country carrying precisely the components that we've just been discussing. It is the case that in order to make sure that we have personal protective equipment, that we have the ingredients for testing, that we have everything that's needed at the front line, that we need to have flights coming into this country. It's also the case that we're repatriating British citizens from abroad, and it's appropriate that they come in. But I do think it's a fair point to say that we do need to think about border controls overall. The advice that we've had, again, from our scientists and doctors, is that none of the flights coming in or the volume of aviation traffic that we've had will have had a significant deleterious effect on the spread of the disease. But again, that's something to be kept under review. My own view is that we should follow the scientific advice. We should heed their call to ensure that we get the equipment that we need. But as with everything, when you have a new virus which poses new challenges, you have to keep things under review.
listening, I just can't help feeling as if it looks like we're always playing catch-up. We thought we had enough protective equipment, then we realised we didn't. We didn't think testing was a priority, now we do, and we're trying to scale it up rapidly. We're still reviewing the evidence on face masks, we're still looking at international travel. Why is it that we seem to have acted more slowly than other countries?
Well, the first thing to say is on personal protective equipment, we did have good stocks, and those stocks were built up partly to deal with a pandemic, flu pandemic, partly because of the experience of preparing for a no-deal Brexit.
That's not what people in the front line have told us.
Well, this is what I'm telling you. We did have those stocks, and we built them up. It is the case that with testing we've always recognised its importance, and we've been making sure that we can develop 5 pillars in order to ensure that we can have a range of tests appropriate to the circumstances. And it is the case that when it comes to areas like the wearing of masks, we've been looking at the scientific evidence. But it comes back to our very first sort of stage of this conversation, when you were quite rightly probing and asking when will certain restrictions be lifted. And I said that we wanted to follow the advice and to only proceed when the scientific advice was clear. There is a temptation, of course, to act in certain circumstances because of understandable pressure from commentators and elsewhere, but our approach is to be guided by the science and to move in a way which is not knee-jerk, but considered. But at the same time, it is the case that there is urgent, active and energetic work across the NHS, across the scientific community and across government in order to ensure that where the science is clear, where our action needs to be urgent, that we're taking it, which is why we have managed to increase the number of ventilators in the NHS and bring new ventilators online. It's why we're increasing our testing capacity, and it's why also we are making sure that as well as bringing PPE from abroad, we're also increasing our capacity to manufacture it at home.
OK, now, in the Sunday Times today,